One of the most common things that we hear when people are working through RST is, I can do it perfect in my drills in slow motion, but when I get to the range, I can't do it. And while to us it seems commonsensical the way that you would think about why that doesn't work, a lot of people it's not very clear. And this is one of the things that in the clinics I spend a tremendous amount of time on. So a lot of people wonder, like, why do you spend so much time in the classroom in the first day of the clinics? If I just watch all the videos on the website, don't I know everything you're going to cover? Well, absolutely not. I go 10 times more in depth on that first day of the clinic than anything that you've ever seen on the website. In fact, I think I spent about over an hour in the morning just discussing how the brain learns, which is just touched on the website. But clearly that's something that a lot of people don't understand fully, and that's why I've recommended books like The Talent Code and others that help give you a picture of that. But like I said, I spend a tremendous amount of time going in depth on that, and I want to touch on it a little bit now so that you kind of get a more clear picture of what you're really trying to do in your swing. So anytime we're doing things in slow motion, there's a purpose to that. That is so that you can start to learn and communicate to your brain what you want your muscles to do and how you want them to move your bones, the joints, and so on and so forth. And you have to do that slow at first. And that's just so that you can perform the movement correctly. You clearly can't do it fast yet. And that's why everything you see on the website is a progressive step-by-step process, so that we start without a golf club, without even our arms. And if we're just learning body movement, we take our arms out of the picture, we learn how to move our body correctly, then we slowly introduce the arms, and then we introduce the club, then we introduce the ball. The same thing is true for you, obviously, when you practice, that you've got to go through that process. You can't just skip from point A to point B. And I try to explain that a lot, again, in the clinics, that that's like driving up a hill in your car in first gear, and it's a very steep hill. You're like, all right, I've got it, I'm going, I'm cruising up the hill. And you're like, all right, well, let's just skip on to fifth gear. And you skip everything in between, clearly you're not going to make it up the hill. And the same is true in the golf swing. When you go from just doing slow motion stuff to going full speed at the range, why would you ever expect that that's going to accomplish anything? Because you've skipped the second, third, and fourth gear. And there's a reason that those gears are there. You need them to help you get up to fifth gear. And the same is true in the golf swing. So when I have my students work on things, we spend a lot of time just, once we've gone through like the basic slow motion stuff where they kind of get the movement and they can kind of perform it, then we break it down and we hit 5-yard pitch shots, and then 15-yard pitch shots, and then 50-yard, and slowly work up to getting closer to full swings. But in a 1-hour lesson or 2-hour lesson, that's very, very difficult to accomplish going up to full speed. So maybe if we work really, really hard and I have a student who's doing well, we might get up to 60%, 70% speed by the end of that lesson. But more importantly, when they go home, they need to go back to the beginning and make sure that they're doing their slow motion stuff at first to keep making sure that the movement is correct. And then they slowly add speed and add speed. By that same token, a lot of guys spend all of their time just doing slow motion drills. And that's not in the context of the swing. You're not moving at this speed as you're working on your golf swing. You're learning a movement pattern at first that you need to move at that speed, because that's as fast as you can go and perform the movement correctly. However, you need to challenge yourself to slowly start ramping back up to what the context of the swing speed is. So if you're working on your takeaway and you're just going, let me slow that down a little bit, going at this speed, while that's great because you're just focusing on your movement, your real takeaway is going to be kind of this fast. It's going to be very, very quick. You have to challenge yourself to move at that speed until it breaks down. So don't be afraid to throw it into second gear and give it a little bit more speed, and check yourself and say, okay, when I start adding speed, I start to go back to the inside, or I roll my wrist, because at speed things will change. Your brain's going to want to fall back into its old movement patterns that it knows how to do. And so you've got to recognize that, and if you just go from first gear to fifth gear, you're never going to see that. So you've got to go to second gear and see what happens, and see where your old tendencies start to fall back in. And then you'll know, okay, now I realize at slow motion I got it perfect. When I go to second gear, I start to roll it in a little bit, and I go to third gear and I really dump it a lot. So I've got to really key in on keeping this right wrist straight, or whatever it is that you're working on. At speed, it's going to tell you where things are going to fall off when you go to your real swing. But you're not going to know that again if you go from slow motion to full speed on the range. It doesn't work that way. You're not going to get anywhere like that. You're just going to go immediately back to your old movement patterns. So the biggest fault that I see people making, again, is going slow motion and then full speed on the range. You need to, if you're trying to change a movement pattern in your golf swing or anything that you're doing, on the range, you need to start out and just make little tiny swings and see if you can perform the movement correctly. If you can do it at that speed, then you can slowly add speed, and you need to, like I just mentioned, you need to challenge yourself until you screw it up, as I say. You go a little bit faster until it breaks down, then you go back and drill closer to that speed until you can do it correctly at that speed, and then you add on and add on and add on and so on down the road. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more. Like I said, in the clinics we go really, really in depth on this, but it's a little bit, like I said, it takes over an hour just to kind of get through that stuff, so it's a little too broad of a scope for a video like this. But you've got to go from first gear to second gear to third gear to fourth gear to fifth gear is the simplest way I could explain it. Think of it as anything else that you've ever done, and it'll help you make more sense of this. When you learned how to drive a car, since I'm stuck on a car theme, when you learned how to drive a stick, which a lot of us learned how to drive a stick, we started out in a parking lot or a backcountry road somewhere, no distractions, no traffic. You didn't start out on the 405 in LA. You start out in someplace quiet with minimal distractions until you can get the feeling of how to let the clutch out and push the gas and how to put it in gear and shift gears. And then the next day you didn't go and try to enter the Indy 500. That's what people are doing when they're going from slow motion, no distractions, quiet parking lot on their golf swing to full speed on the range or on the course, and then I wonder, why did it break down? Well, nothing that you've ever done in your life you learn that way. You have to go through slow, and it's kind of clumsy and cumbersome, and you're really thinking your way through it consciously, so it's really chunky and it's not very smooth. That's normal learning. So when you're learning like that, you've got to go really slow and slowly build up, and you've got to really consciously override things until it becomes more common. But at the same point, like I mentioned earlier, at some point you've got to trust it a little bit and see what happens when you add speed to it, and objectively look at it and say what broke down, and then you're able to add a little bit more speed or go back and drill it and keep going. So, but eventually you've got to transfer that into your subconscious and stop thinking about it so much. You've got to let it start to flow a little bit, and that's when your subconscious mind is starting to help you out a little bit, take over. But you can't just start there. You have to force your body to do something new at first until it becomes ingrained, and that's what all the reps and drills are for. But you need to go through this progression. So don't just get stuck in first gear the whole time, and then don't think you can go from first gear to fifth gear. You need all the steps in between, and that's why the website videos are set up the way that they are. Very progressive, very specific in how I add pieces to the swing to make it a little bit more complicated, a little bit more challenging each time, until you make it like a normal golf swing. But you can't do it with a golf club right away. It doesn't work that way. So just take your time working through the drills on the website, challenge yourself, add a little bit of speed at a time until you become proficient at it. It will take time. It's just the way it is. It's the way our brains are geared to work. But if you do that, you will make dramatic improvements.